The courtroom was silent when the man on the stand finally broke. His hands trembled against the polished wood rail. Sweat darkened the collar of his tailored navy suit. For the first time in his life, Jonathan Kessler, CEO, donor, kingmaker, looked small. The judge leaned forward. "Answer the question, sir." Kessler swallowed. His eyes flicked just once toward the back of the courtroom. That's where the boy sat. Not a boy anymore. But the same eyes. The same face. The same presence Kessler had ordered removed years ago. I didn't think anyone was listening," Kessler said finally, his voice cracking. "He was just a kid." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You mean the hungry boy outside your private meeting?" she asked. "The one your security escorted out?" Kessler's jaw tightened. "Yes." The judge's gavel struck once, hard. And in that moment, every powerful man in the room understood the same terrifying truth. The child they ignored had been listening the entire time. 12 years earlier. The smell of buttered rolls drifted through the marble hallway, slow and cruel. Ethan Reed felt his stomach twist. He hadn't eaten since the night before, a half cup of noodles, cold, shared with his younger sister. Their mother had promised breakfast that morning, but promises bent easily when rent was due. Ethan sat on the floor outside Conference Room B of the Harrington Financial Tower, his back against the wall, knees pulled to his chest. The carpet was thick and soft, the kind that made footsteps disappear. He pressed his palms into it, wondering how something could feel so expensive and still mean nothing to him. Inside the room, men laughed. Not loud laughter, controlled laughter, the kind that meant power. Ethan wasn't supposed to be there. His mother was cleaning offices on the 22nd floor that day, filling in for someone who'd quit. She told him to stay put, not to talk, not to touch anything, just wait until she was done. So he waited. People passed without seeing him. A man in a gray suit nearly tripped over his foot and didn't apologize. A woman on her phone stepped around him like he was a trash can. A security guard glanced once, then looked away. Invisible was safer. Then the doors opened. For just a moment. A man stepped out to take a call, his voice low, his watch flashing silver under the lights. As the door swung back, sound spilled into the hallway. "Can't afford delays anymore." Ethan's head lifted. Another voice replied, calm, amused. "Delays are only a problem if someone's watching." The door began to close. Ethan stood. He didn't know why, he just did. He took 2 quiet steps forward. The door didn't seal completely. Inside, the voices continued. "We move forward as planned," someone said. "Once it's approved, there's no stopping it." "And the inspections?" another asked. A pause. Then a soft laugh. "Handled." Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't understand the words, not fully, but he understood the tone. The way people spoke when they believed they were untouchable. Ethan edged closer. The crack in the door revealed polished shoes, a long table, bottled water untouched, men leaning back relaxed. "And if something goes wrong?" a voice asked. This time, the answer came without hesitation. "Then it's already too late." Ethan's breath caught. Something was wrong. He didn't know what, he didn't know how, but he knew the feeling, the same one he'd felt the night his father didn't come home from the construction site. The same tightness, the same quiet dread. He pushed the door. It opened. Every head turned. Silence crashed down like a wave. Ethan stood there, skinny, shaking, sneakers worn thin at the toes. The smell of food drifted from the table behind them. I'm sorry," he said quickly, "but I heard." A chair scraped back. "What is this?" Jonathan Kessler snapped. Ethan took a step forward. "Please," he said. I think something bad is going to happen." A few men exchanged looks, smirks. One of them chuckled. "Is this a joke?" Kessler stood. He didn't look at Ethan. He looked past him toward the doorway. "Security." Ethan's heart pounded. "No, wait," he said. "I heard you say." "Get him out." Two guards appeared instantly. Ethan twisted back toward the table, desperation spilling out of him. "People could get hurt," he said. "I know I'm just a kid, but—" The guard's hand closed around his arm. The door shut. The voices inside resumed. And Ethan Reed was dragged back into the hallway, his warning swallowed by carpet and glass. He didn't cry right away. He sat where they left him, his arm aching, his face burning. His mother found him there later, worry flooding her eyes. He told her what happened. She hugged him tight and whispered the same thing everyone else always did. "Don't get involved with people like that." That night, Ethan lay awake in their tiny Bronx apartment, staring at the ceiling as sirens echoed outside. He replayed the voices in his head. "Once it's approved. Handled. Too late." He didn't know why, but he felt certain of one thing. The men behind that door were dangerous, and no one was going to stop them. Outside, the city moved on. Lights glowed, deals were signed, power flowed. And somewhere deep inside it all, a decision made behind a closed door had already begun to spread. The hallway emptied slowly after the doors closed. The laughter returned inside the conference room, muted but steady, like nothing had happened. Ethan stayed where he was, pressed against the wall, his heart still racing, his ears burning from the guard's grip on his arm. He tried to listen again. But now the door was fully sealed. All he could hear was the hum of the building, air vents whispering, elevators sighing somewhere far above, the distant clatter of dishes being cleared away. The smell of food lingered, sharp and unfair. Ethan pulled his knees closer to his chest. His stomach growled, loud enough that he pressed his palm against it, embarrassed even though no one was looking. Inside his head, the words replayed. "Once it's approved. Handled. Too late." He didn't know what approval meant or who gave it, but he knew what too late felt like. It was the sound of sirens in the distance. It was his mother crying quietly in the kitchen when she thought he was asleep. It was the empty chair where his father used to sit. Time passed, he wasn't sure how much. People came and went. None of them spoke to him. A few glanced his way, then looked through him as if he were part of the building's furniture. At one point, a man dropped a folder near Ethan's feet. Papers spilled out, charts, numbers, sharp lines and arrows pointing upward. The man scooped them up without a word and walked on. Ethan wondered if those papers had anything to do with what he'd heard. The door opened again. This time men stepped out in pairs, relaxed, confident, jackets draped over their arms. One of them laughed and said, "We'll toast to it tonight." Another checked his watch and nodded, satisfied. Jonathan Kessler was the last to leave. He paused just outside the room, adjusting his cufflinks. His face was calm, composed, the face of a man who never doubted the outcome of anything. His eyes flicked briefly down the hallway. They passed over Ethan, then moved on. Ethan watched him disappear around the corner, a strange heaviness settling in his chest. Whatever had been decided in that room was already finished, signed, approved, untouchable. His mother came out of the elevator a few minutes later, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. Her smile faded the moment she saw his face. "What happened?" she asked softly. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I heard something," he said. "They were talking about doing something bad." She glanced down the hallway, instinctively lowering her voice. "Ethan, you can't listen to people like that." "But they said." She knelt in front of him and took his hands, her own rough and tired. "Listen to me," she said. Those men are powerful. You don't want trouble." Her eyes weren't angry. They were afraid. That night the words followed him home. They echoed through the cramped apartment as he lay on the couch, his sister asleep beside him, the glow of the streetlight leaking through the blinds. He imagined closed doors everywhere, rooms he would never enter, decisions made without him, consequences he would feel but never understand. He didn't know it then, but what he'd heard that day would become the sharpest memory of his life. Years later, he would still hear it in his sleep. The first report came 6 months later. It was on a small television mounted in the corner of a bodega, the sound turned low. Ethan stood near the counter, counting coins for a loaf of bread, when the screen showed flashing lights and smoke rising into the night sky. A power facility had failed, equipment malfunction, temporary outage. The reporter spoke calmly, professionally. Ethan stopped counting. Behind the reporter, workers in hard hats moved with urgency. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind. The words "Safety Review" scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Ethan felt that tightness again. Over the next year, it happened more often. A water system compromised in one city, a structural failure in another. Each time officials said the same things: unforeseeable, isolated, under investigation. Ethan started paying attention. He listened more carefully now, read headlines at the library, watched the news when he could. He noticed patterns where others saw noise. He noticed how certain names appeared again and again, buried in articles no one talked about. Harrington Financial, Kessler Group, subsidiaries, partners. The same men. He told no one, not his mother, not his teachers. He didn't know how to explain it without sounding foolish. He was just a kid who once listened at a door. By the time he was 16, he'd stopped trying to talk about it at all. Life hardened him instead. He worked after school, then during school, then not at all. Hunger became familiar, almost expected. Authority became something to avoid. Trust became expensive. But memory stayed sharp. Every time he saw Jonathan Kessler on television, smiling, shaking hands, announcing another expansion, Ethan remembered the closed door, the laughter, the word handled. And he wondered how many people paid the price for decisions they never knew were made. When he was 19, the call came. It was late. His phone buzzed on the cracked table beside his bed, an unknown number. He almost ignored it. "Hello," he said. There was a pause, breathing on the other end. "You don't know me," a man said quietly, "but I know who you are, and I know what you heard." Ethan sat up. "Who is this?" he asked. "I used to work for them," the man said. "I was in that room, not at the table in the back." Ethan's mouth went dry. "I saw you," the man continued. "I've thought about that day for years." "Why are you calling me?" Ethan asked. "Because it's happening again." The line went dead. 2 weeks later, a federal investigation was announced. This time it was bigger, louder, too big to ignore. Names surfaced, documents leaked, news anchors spoke with urgency instead of polish. And buried in one article, almost as an afterthought, was a familiar phrase: "Override protocols approved." Ethan stared at the screen, his pulse pounding. They were still doing it. He tried to speak up. He emailed journalists. He sent letters to offices he'd never seen. He showed up at buildings and was turned away. Once, he made it past the lobby and was stopped by security before he reached the elevators. "Sir, you need to leave," they told him. "I know something," he said. "I heard something years ago." They didn't ask what. They never did. Online, strangers mocked him when he commented under articles. They called him names. They said he was chasing attention. They said people like him always wanted someone to blame. The words hurt more than he expected. For a while he stopped trying. Then the man called again. This time he sent proof. An audio file, old, scratchy, recorded from a phone hidden in a jacket pocket. Ethan sat alone as he pressed play. Voices filled the room. Familiar voices. Once it's approved. Handled. Too late. Ethan closed his eyes. 12 years collapsed into a single moment. The truth was no longer just his memory. It was evidence. From there, things moved faster than he could process. Lawyers got involved, investigators followed, subpoenas were issued, the story spread, not quietly this time but with force. Cameras returned to the buildings. Questions were asked in rooms that had once been sealed shut. Jonathan Kessler denied everything at first, then denied knowing, then denied remembering. Until the day Ethan walked into the courtroom and saw him for the first time in over a decade. Kessler looked older, smaller, but the confidence was still there, clinging to him like armor. Until Ethan took the stand. "I was hungry," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the room. "I was waiting for my mom to finish cleaning. I heard you talking." Kessler stared straight ahead. "You didn't think I mattered," Ethan continued. "You thought no one was listening." The courtroom held its breath. Ethan remembered the hallway, the carpet, the smell of food. He remembered being invisible. And as the recording played for the jury, he realized something that surprised even him. He wasn't angry anymore. He was ready. Ready to be heard. The media called it a reckoning. Ethan experienced it as a slow, grinding pressure that never let up. Once the recording surfaced, the story refused to stay quiet. It spread across outlets in waves, each one louder than the last. First, the business pages picked it up, cautious and technical. Then the evening news. Then late-night panels, podcasts, opinion columns. The same footage of Jonathan Kessler entering buildings, jaw tight, eyes forward, played on loop. Ethan watched from borrowed couches and cheap diner booths, his phone buzzing constantly with messages from people he didn't know. Reporters wanted interviews. Advocacy groups wanted statements. Lawyers wanted meetings. Everyone suddenly cared about the boy who had once been dragged out of a hallway. But not everyone believed him. Kessler's legal team moved fast. They questioned the recording's authenticity. They suggested editing. They painted Ethan as unreliable, emotionally damaged, motivated by money he didn't even know how to ask for. He was a child, one attorney said on television. Memories are fragile, easily influenced. Ethan turned the TV off. The hardest part wasn't the doubt, it was the waiting. Weeks passed as the investigation widened. Subpoenas uncovered emails, internal memos, approvals stamped with dates that matched the words Ethan had overheard. Safety protocols altered. Inspections rushed. Profits spiking immediately after failures. The pattern was undeniable. Still, power resisted. Executives resigned quietly. Others vanished behind legal walls. Kessler released a statement expressing sympathy for victims while denying any personal wrongdoing. He donated to relief funds. He smiled for cameras at charity events. It almost worked. Then the second revelation hit. A former engineer came forward, then another, then a third. They spoke about overrides, about warnings ignored, about pressure from above, about meetings behind closed doors where outcomes were decided before questions were asked. Each testimony pointed higher. Each one circled back to Kessler. Ethan sat in a federal office one afternoon as an investigator slid a folder across the table. "Did you ever see this man before?" she asked. Ethan looked down at the photograph. It was the man who had laughed behind the door, the calm voice, the one who said handled. "Yes," Ethan said, "he was there." The investigator nodded. "He's agreed to testify." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. When the indictment finally came, it landed like an earthquake. Charges of conspiracy, fraud, criminal negligence, multiple counts. Names that had once been untouchable were now inked onto court documents anyone could read. Jonathan Kessler was ordered to appear. The trial date was set. The city buzzed with it. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse weeks in advance. Some held signs demanding justice. Others defended Kessler, convinced he was being targeted because of his success. Ethan walked past them on the first day, head down, heart pounding. He felt small again, like he did in that hallway years ago, only this time cameras followed him. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than he expected. Wood polished to a dull shine, flags hanging heavy, the seal of the court staring down at everyone, impartial and unmoved. Ethan took his seat behind the prosecution table, hands folded tight. Across the room, Jonathan Kessler entered with his attorneys. He wore the same composed expression he always had, but something was missing now. Certainty. The trial unfolded slowly, deliberately. Experts testified. Documents were projected onto screens. Emails were read aloud, their words stripped of context and exposed to the light. Jurors leaned forward as timelines were drawn, lines connecting decisions to disasters. Kessler listened without reaction. Until the recording played. The room went silent as the familiar voices filled the air. Once it's approved. Handled. Too late. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He didn't look at Kessler. He stared at the jury instead, watching their faces change as understanding set in. For the first time, the words didn't feel heavy. They felt sharp. When it was Ethan's turn to testify, he stood slowly, aware of every movement. The oath sounded distant, ceremonial. He took his seat and faced the room. The prosecutor asked him to describe that day. Ethan spoke carefully, about hunger, about waiting, about the crack in the door, about the feeling in his chest when he realized something was wrong. He didn't exaggerate, he didn't accuse. He just told the truth. Why didn't you forget it? The prosecutor asked. Ethan paused. Because no one listened, he said, and people kept getting hurt. The defense tried to shake him. They questioned his memory, his motives, his past. They suggested he misunderstood adult conversation. They implied he was coached. Ethan answered calmly. I didn't know what everything meant, he said, but I knew it wasn't right. Jonathan Kessler finally looked at him then. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, Ethan saw something flicker across Kessler's face. Recognition, regret, fear. Then it was gone. The engineer testified next. Then another. Each one added weight, layer by layer, until the structure Kessler had built his life on began to crack. The prosecution rested. The defense called their witnesses. They argued complexity, distance, delegation. They said no single man could be responsible for such vast operations. But the jury had heard the voices, seen the dates, followed the money. And they had seen Ethan. Closing arguments came and went. The judge instructed the jury. They filed out, silent and serious. The weight was unbearable. Ethan sat on a hard bench in the hallway, staring at the floor. His mother sat beside him, holding his hand the way she used to when he was small. Neither of them spoke. Hours passed. Then footsteps. The bailiff opened the door. The jury has reached a verdict. Ethan's heart hammered as they returned to their seats. Jonathan Kessler stood, straightening his jacket, his face unreadable. The foreperson rose. On the first count, guilty. A murmur rippled through the room. On the second count, guilty. Ethan felt his breath catch. On the remaining counts, guilty. Jonathan Kessler closed his eyes. The judge thanked the jury. Sentencing would follow, cameras flashed, voices rose. Ethan stayed seated, hands trembling, as the weight of it all finally began to lift. Outside the courthouse, the crowd surged. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones were thrust toward him. "How does it feel?" someone asked. Ethan looked up at the building behind them, tall, imposing, no longer untouchable. "It feels late," he said, "but it feels real." That night he walked alone through the city. The lights were bright, the streets loud. Life went on the way it always did. But something had shifted. Somewhere behind some door, someone would think twice before saying handled. Ethan stopped at a crosswalk and watched people stream past him, each one carrying something unseen. He wondered how many warnings were still being ignored, how many voices still dismissed. He knew now that listening mattered, even when the voice was small, even when it came from a hungry boy sitting on a carpeted floor. Especially then. The city hummed around him, unaware, unbothered. And Ethan kept walking, the echo of a closed door finally fading behind him.